Hi students, welcome to lesson 13, Liberal Feminism. Now let us start with the introduction. Liberal feminism is a particular approach to achieving equality between men and women that emphasizes the power of an individual person to alter discriminatory practices against women. Over 100 years ago, the participants in the Women's Suffrage Parade of 1913 took a liberal feminist approach by using their democratic right to protest to promote women's rights. Now, the lesson objectives are to know the theme of liberal feminism, to learn the goals of liberal feminism. The theory of the lesson goes in such way: liberal feminism aims for individuals use their own abilities and the democratic process to help women and men become more equal in the eyes of the law, in society and in the workplace. By organizing women into larger groups that can speak at a higher level, lobbying legislatures and raising awareness of issues, liberal feminists use available resources and tools to advocate for change. As such, they stand in contrast to Marxist or socialist feminists who believe the democratic process itself need to be changed. For instance, what would you do if someone at work repeatedly made inappropriate remarks to you or your co-workers? Would you speak with your supervisor? Would you file a complaint with the company's human resource department? Or if the company did not comply with harassment laws, would you seek legal representation or speak out publicly against the company's lack of compliance? If you would be in the workforce prior to the passing of the 1964, the Civil Rights Act, you might have sought out other people in your community who had experienced the same thing or voted for someone supporting legislation to prevent sexual harassment. Or perhaps would you have kept working for the same company, hoping for a promotion and the authority to change its corporate culture over time? The actions we have just discussed demonstrate the liberal feminist approach of working within the democratic system to improve conditions. Now, let us have a look on the goals of liberal feminism. The Jagger describes liberal feminism as the theory and work that concentrates more on issues such as equality in the workplace, in education and in political rights. Liberal feminism also focuses on how private life impedes or enhances public equality. Thus, liberal feminists tend to support marriage as an equal partnership and more male involvement in childcare, support for abortion and other reproductive rights to do with control of one's life and autonomy, and ending domestic violence and sexual harassment remove obstacles to women achieving on an equal level with men. Liberal feminism's primary goal is gender equality in the public sphere, such as equal access to education, equal pay, ending job sex segregation and better working conditions. From this standpoint, legal changes would make these goals possible. Private sphere issues are of concern mainly as they influence or impede equality in the public sphere. Gaining access to and being paid and promoted equally in traditionally male dominated occupations is an important goal. What do women want? Liberal feminists believe they want the same thing men want: to get an education, to make a decent living, to provide for one's family. Now, what are the means and methods here? The means and methods are: liberal feminism tends to rely on the state to gain equality, to see the state as the protector of individual rights. Liberal feminists, for example, support affirmative action legislation requiring employers or educational institutions to make special attempts to include women in the pool of applicants, on the assumption that past and current discrimination may simply overlook many qualified women applicants. Passage of the Equal Rights Amendment era has been a key goal for liberal feminists. From the original women's suffrage proponents who moved to advocate a federal equality amendment to many of the feminists of the 1960s and 70s in organizations including the National Organization for Women, each generation viewed the amendment as necessary to create more just society. Liberal feminism began in the 18th and 19th century and has continued to the present time. Throughout its history, liberal feminist movement has focused on eliminating female subordination rooted in customary and legal restrictions prohibiting women from entering and succeeding in the so-called public world. Liberal feminism is a theory that focuses more on issues such as the workplace, education and political rights. Liberal feminism also focuses on how private life hinders or enhances public equality. As such, liberal feminists tend to favor marriage as an equal partnership and greater male involvement in parenting. Ending domestic violence and sexual harassment will remove barriers to equality between women and men. The main goal of liberal feminism is gender equality in the public sphere, such as equal education, equal pay for equal work, ending gender segregation at work and better working conditions. From this perspective, changes in the law will make these goals possible. An important goal is equal pay and promotion in traditionally male-dominated occupations. Regarding the needs of women, liberal feminists think they want the same things as men want: to receive an education and a decent life to provide for their families. Liberal feminism tends to rely on the state for equality, seeing the state as the protector of individual rights. Liberalism is a series of doctrines that emphasize the value of liberty and advocate that a just state ensures individual liberty. Liberal feminists embrace this value and the role of the state with insistence on women's freedom. Now, let us have a look on the types of feminism, where the liberal feminism is one of that. This feminism focuses on women's legal rights and gender equality. They believe that women have the same rights as men and that women's integration into the public sphere is as important as men's integration into society. Women should participate in economic, educational, decision making and legal development. The Marxist feminism. Marxist feminism took ideals from Marx's writings and applied them to the treatment of women during movements in the 19th, 20th and 21st centuries. Marxist feminists believe that the path to women's liberation is to dismantle a capitalist society that allows women to work for free. The cultural feminism. Cultural feminism examines radical feminist beliefs and transforms them in a way that celebrates what it means to be a woman. The term first became popular in 1970, while the notion that male-dominated societies set oppressive standards for women persist. Cultural feminism has retracted and raised those standards. Characters like mothers are seen in cultural feminism as the natural beauty of a woman's body, soul and spirit. Now, the socialist feminism. It focuses more on social relations and believes that women's liberation must be in conjunction with social and economic justice. The key to socialist feminism is that patriarchy and capitalism are intertwined forms of exploitation and oppression of women. Radical feminism. It talks about the social dominance of men over women. They focus on abolishing patriarchy instead of adjusting the system by changing the laws. Radical feminists also object to economic or class issues that they equate with oppression, such as socialist or Marxist feminism. Now, let us look into a brief history of liberal feminism. The ongoing struggle for equality dates back centuries, but the tradition of liberal feminism stems from the specific philosophies and policies within the women's movement. Here is a brief overview of the history of liberal feminism. Early activism. Liberal feminism began during the Enlightenment with the rise of a political philosophy known as classical liberalism. Like many classic liberals of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, liberal feminists believed that the best path to women's liberation was the right to vote. Early feminist scholars and activists were inspired by Mary Wollstonecraft's A Defense of the Rights of Women 1792 and later by John Stuart Mill's Female Subdued 1869. They also focused on the right to education and paid work. Later, the focus shifted to political rights because women were considered vulnerable in society, and to uplift the status of women, political rights were considered very important. All this led to the first wave of feminism. The Seneca Falls Convention. The 1848 convention in Seneca Falls, New York, organized by early American feminists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, was probably the first of the feminist movements and the conferences. The discussions at the event focused on sexism in public spaces and the extension of fundamental rights, with a focus on voting at the 1848 convention. Stanton read the Declaration of Sentiments, a statement of grievances and demands patterned after the Declaration of Independence. She called on women to organize and fight for their rights. The convention passed 12 resolutions and 11 of which were unanimous, aimed at acquiring certain rights and privileges denied to women in that era. The ninth resolution demanded voting rights for women. It passed after the insistence of Stanton, but later it caused many backers of women's rights to withdraw their support. Still, it was a cornerstone of the women's suffrage movement, culminating in the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920. The right to vote. In 1920, American women gained the right to vote and hold public office. These are important steps towards an egalitarian society with gender equality. The following year, as head of National Women's Suffrage Association in 1900, Carrie Chapman attempted to link women's suffrage to America's war effort in the First World. Although many of her fellow activists were anti-war practiced, Cat made the controversial decision to support the war, thereby portraying the women's suffrage movement as patriotic. The effort was successful. President Woodrow Wilson also expressed his support for female enfranchisement. On August 18, 1920, Congress ratified the 19th Amendment, which guaranteed the right to vote for all American citizens regardless of gender. The 19th Amendment was a significant victory and a turning point for the feminist movement. The civil rights. Major feminist activism gained momentum in 1960s when many liberal feminists discovered a link between racism and sexism. During this period, pressure to pass the Equal Rights Amendment increased. Its report, published in 1963, strongly supported the nuclear family and women's preparation for motherhood. But it also documents a national pattern of workplace discrimination, unequal pay, legal inequalities and meagre support services for working women that needs to be remedied through laws guaranteeing equal pay for equal work. The Equal Employment Opportunity and expanded child care services. The Equal Pay Act 1963 provided the guarantee, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was amended to prohibit employers from discriminating based on sex. What are the three tenets? Liberal feminism is different from other feminist ideas and activism. Here are some tenets of liberal feminism. Individualism. Liberal feminism focuses on individual freedom and autonomy. They are rooted in liberal feminism. Individualist feminists took a more legitimate approach to equality, invoking the natural law theory, and they want to fully recognize women's individual rights through laws that protect the persons and private property of men and women equally. When people think of feminism these days, individual feminism often comes to mind, precisely because it has become so mainstream. Legal and political reforms. Liberal feminists tend to focus on using existing systems of power such as courts and government to secure rights and improve women's lives. Women have historically fought for equal access to public institutions and the workplace, and representation in cutting edge industries is a sign of progress. Pragmatism. Many liberal feminists take a pragmatic approach to reform. They look for political struggles that seem to be won and gains they can make in the current political and economic structure of society. Rise of liberal feminism in India. In India, the feminist movement has grown rapidly in modern times. In order to understand and empathize with the feminist response, it is important to note that Indian feminists present a completely different sequence of images. The long and painful suffering of women, the uphill struggle to get rid of the idea of equal pay for equal work, the ongoing struggle for women's abortion rights and contraceptive practices are some of the clear signs of gender inequality that has continued and that women have had to fight. The feminist situation in India has had different periods, and Indian society has always been hierarchical. The various hierarchies within the family that concretize age, gender and status, and within the community in relation to social caste, education, occupation and relationship to the ruling power are very strictly maintained. One of the first concerns of women's groups across the country is violence against women, especially in India, and in the form of rape and dowry deaths. The killing of young married women for dowry. For dowry, money or goods is also common in India, and under the current circumstances, this is also the beginning of the women's learning process. Most of these protests have focused on the state level, and as women were able to mobilize support, the state government appeared to have responded positively by revising rape and dowry laws to make both stricter. This seemed like a huge victory at the time, but people are starting to realize that unless there is a will and a mechanism to implement it locally, there is little point in just changing the law, and that the core issue of discrimination against women is not just in the law, but is much more widespread. To remove such stereotypical practices, Savitribai Phule worked with her husband and other women to end caste discrimination and sexism. She also set up the Bali Hatya Pratibandhak Griha to prevent female infanticide and to oppose the killing of widows and pregnant rape victims. Today's Indian feminist advocates highly regard Savitribai Phule, and another very famous liberal feminist named Tarabai Shinde protested against the patriarchy and caste discrimination. She opposed the patriarchy inherent in Hindu scriptures, and her views are still contested to this day. Her first work in Marathi, Stri Purush Tulana, translation comparison of men and women, explored the differences between men and women and is considered one of the earliest modern feminist writings in India. Tarabai Shinde was a partner of the Phule couple, and their shared views on gender and caste oppressions gave her the platform she needed to lead her fight for women's rights in India. However, Tarabai Shinde not only focused on women in India, but also believes that women all over the world are equally oppressed. In the early 21st century, Indian feminism tackled a range of issues from domestic violence and rape to victim stigma and consent. Indira Jaisingh's tireless efforts contributed to the drafting of the Domestic Violence Act 2005. The tireless efforts of Meenakshi Arora, a senior lawyer in the Supreme Court of India, led to the drafting of the Vishaka Guidelines, which culminated in the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act 2013. Activist Kavita Krishnan sparked a series of protests and riots following the 2012 Nirbhaya rape case, culminating in the 2013 Criminal Code Amendment legislation, making changes to the country's existing rape laws. While much work remains to be done, the movement to secure women's rights has come a long way with these inspiring and fierce figures who contributed against patriarchy. Many other individuals and organizations are working for gender equality and justice in India, and their efforts are paying off. liberal feminism in India today shows some encouraging trends. They are: increasing economic freedom enables women to combat stereotypes. Women's desire are changing from economic rights to social and sexual rights. Women do not give up their space and they usually fight harder to achieve it. There is genuine partnership and collaboration between women and men, especially the youth, to achieve meaningful gender equality. The internet is helping women build communities and networks, giving them a greater voice and tools, organize and assert their rights. To sum up the lesson, liberal feminism, which aims for individuals to use their own abilities and the democratic process to help women and men become more equal in the eyes of the law, in society and in the workplace. By organizing women into larger groups that can speak at a higher level, lobbying legislatures and raising the awareness of issues, liberal feminists use available resources and tools to advocate for change. Liberal feminist activism continues to this days, although the movement as a whole has diversified in representation and philosophy. Women increasingly control public spaces, participate in decision making, promote their views and aspirations, and hold themselves accountable for different types of work. The patriarchal structure is increasingly questioned around the world. The process of achieving political and economic equality between men and women seems irreversible. Thank you.